everyone. My name's Michelle Marshall, and today I'm interviewing poet and author Sophie Jupillat Posey in head of World Poetry Day on March the 21st. Nice to speak to you, Sophie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. You very kindly agreed to answer some of my questions, so I'll go ahead with that if that's okay with you.
Yes, of course.
I'd like to start by asking you, when did you first discover that you had a gift for writing poetry?
Somewhere around third or fourth grade, I remember it was around that year that the teacher decided to start teaching poetry in the classroom. And it's also around that time my parents started buying books about poetry, but for kids in a fun way. I remember the book had all kinds of like different genres of poems and examples and like little exercises, test your creativeness. And also in school, they were giving us prompts and stuff to do our poetry. And I just really enjoyed it, so I started writing and writing and writing. And at one point in school, the teacher asked us to showcase our favorite poem, what we were most proud of. And I'd written a poem about springtime because it really is one of my favorite, it still is, seasons. So I remember reading it to the classroom, and the teacher and the students seemed to really, really like it. Or like, oh, it really felt like a connection. Like you really love spring. So that was kind of the first taste of it. And then afterwards, I kept writing and sharing with classmates and my family and whatever. And they were like, yeah, there's a connection of the way you write is elicits emotions and images and impressions. I was like, okay, well, that's exactly what I want to do. So hopefully this gift is working.
Oh, that's a lovely story. And which poets inspired you, Sophie?
um, when you sent me that email and realized that question, I was like, this is going to be so hard to answer because there's so many,
Hmm.
so many. I'm going to try and keep it concise. Uh, So I was raised in a bilingual household, French and English, and so I was exposed to a lot of American and British poets in school. But in my home, I was exposed to a lot of French poets and stuff. So it's kind of a mishmash. I like, the Homeric sort of poetry, the epic Iliad and Odyssey and all that stuff. I like everything Shakespeare pretty much did, all his sonnets, even the cheekier ones. Um, a lot of the bulk of my favorite stuff is from the Romantic period, Walt Whitman and Keats and um, Shelley and uh, Dickinson, kind of all from that era, um, as well as some of the more weirder like Edgar Allan Poe stuff, that sort of thing. Um, after that, after that, it sort of tapers off. I'm not too much a fan of contemporary poetry, but there are exceptions like Mary Oliver, that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's kind of all over the place. Lyrical poetry. So there, I was a huge, massive, super huge fan of Victor Hugo in my teens. His
Mhm.
Contemplation collection of poetry was astounding. Like I kept rereading and rereading and rereading it every time we read it, or every time I read it, something new or some new detail would pop up, or I would discover some new like metric that he used, or this metaphor that really sung, and it's like, oh, it was amazing.
There's some absolutely amazing poets there that have inspired you. And what's your favorite poem by another poet, Sophie?
Also, very, very hard to answer. Um, I think my favorite poem, one of my favorites, would be Ozymandias
Mhm.
by Shelley. I think it was like seventh or eighth grade when we started reading his poetry, and it was one of those poems where I first read it. I was like, this is really bizarre. And then it was one of those poems. The more you read it, the more you're like, oh, okay, that's the underlying picture underneath it, and it's really like kind of epic in its own way.
And what is your favorite poem that you've written yourself? And would you be up for reciting a few lines for us?
Sure. I've one of my favorite poems come from this this chapbook, which you have behind you too,
Yeah.
offering Sicily. So this is a chapbook of poetry about the moon I started writing in my teens and finished a couple years ago. Um, in it, one of my favorite poems is Dragon Secrets. It really combines my love of fantasy with my love of nature and the beauty of the moon. I can't do it by heart though. I have to read it.
That's not a problem.
Okay. I'll read the beginning. So, they whispered of dragon secrets by the moonlight, secrets that trembled, secrets that glimmered, secrets that roared and grumbled for centuries. Once upon a time, dragons could be seen in the mirrors of the elders' hearts. Once upon a time, the elders held a guild of dragon lore in their hands. From generation to generation, they whispered of dragon secrets. But no longer did they tremble, no longer did they glimmer, as men forgot the stories that enchanted them. So did the dragons forget their place and their secrets, becoming embroiled in whispery gray hues of forgetfulness. I'll stop here.
And it's perfectly on topic as well, with it being an interview with the book dragon and the year of the dragon and everything. But that was absolutely beautiful, Sophie. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And what advice would you give to anyone who wants to start writing poetry?
To really just have fun with it.
Mhm.
I think people in certain academic settings, people tend to want poetry to be like this very like controlled, rigid, structured animal. And it can be, you know, if people want to write that sort of poetry and enjoy reading it. But poetry has so many different forms. Even in college and stuff, I took some poetry workshops and classes, and was still finding out new forms that exist and are being formed today.
Mhm.
So yeah, whatever age you're at, it's like just enjoy, explore, read a lot to see if there are poetry that connect with you and others that you simply hate. And just have fun, you know, give yourself prompts, or there's tons of websites now and books that are like, here are prompts of whatever topic, try this form, try this structure, and just do that. And then soon you'll find a genre and a structure that you really like. Or freestyle, a lot of people do that too.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's some really good advice there. It's been an absolute pleasure to interview you today, Sophie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, it was a pleasure too.
Bye for now.